Welcome to The Explainer. I am so thrilled to have you here today, mainly because we're tackling a topic that perfectly bridges the gap between ancient frameworks and deep modern psychology. If you're someone who loves understanding the hidden scaffolding behind human behavior, you are absolutely going to love this. Today, we're exploring a fascinating astrological and psychological concept, Ketu in the 8th house. Now, I know astrology can sometimes feel a little esoteric to some, but I promise you the way we're going to break this down today is going to make it incredibly grounded, practical, and honestly, deeply relevant to anyone who's ever wrestled with trying to manage the sheer unpredictability of life. I mean, really, think about this for a second. Do you ever feel like life just deliberately dismantles your best laid plans? You've mapped everything out, you've checked every single box, you've got a firm, white-knuckle grip on the steering wheel, and then boom. Seemingly out of nowhere, the road completely changes direction. It's a deeply frustrating, completely human experience. And as we look at the source material today, we're going to see exactly why this happens. And spoiler alert, it's not some random punishment. It is actually a structured, purposeful architecture meant to facilitate your personal growth. Okay, let's dive right into this. Section 1, the illusion of control. This is our foundational conflict. Let's clear up a massive misconception right out of the gate. Ketu in the 8th house is not some spooky, inescapable prophecy, right? It is not a fixed fate. Instead, it represents these deep psychological and karmic tendencies. It's basically a recurring pattern. And what exactly is the purpose of that pattern? It's to teach surrender. But here's the catch. Life doesn't just politely ask you to surrender. It facilitates it through the steady dissolution of your control points. The universe literally targets the exact things you're gripping onto the tightest. It's a mechanism fundamentally designed for your conscious evolution, dismantling the scaffolding of your comfort zone so you can actually finally grow. And because of this dynamic, people going through this transformative cycle often experience this really subtle, recurring fear of loss. And this happens even when life is completely stable. You could have money in the bank, a solid job, a wonderful partner, and yet there's this quiet hum of anxiety constantly in the background. This underlying fear specifically targets your feelings around security and trust. It creates this incredibly tricky psychological illusion that because things feel secretly fragile, you need to tighten your grip even more to keep them safe. But as we're about to see, tightening your grip is exactly what triggers the lesson. Which brings us to Section 2, sudden shifts and endings, the disruption phase. Now, what's really interesting about this is the specific targets of this disruption. We're talking relationships, jobs, and emotional bonds. These aren't minor inconveniences like, getting a flat tire on the way to work. These are the core pillars of our identity and our security. The source points out that in these exact areas, you'll often experience repeated endings and closures. A job might just end abruptly. A deeply held emotional bond might completely sever in a way that feels totally unfinished. I know, it feels chaotic, but it is highly targeted. These sudden endings are uniquely engineered to push those tough lessons of detachment. And here is the brutal irony of this whole mechanism. The more control is forced, the more unpredictable the outcome becomes. Life repeatedly disrupts the exact situations you try to manage the most tightly. And this is especially true in close personal bonds. Partners or intimate relationships will often trigger situations where your emotional control simply cannot be maintained. So the harder you try to force an outcome, the wilder and more uncontrollable the situation gets. It's basically life's way of proving that your grip on the situation was entirely an illusion to begin with. Moving on to Section 3, withdrawal and inner detachment. This is the inner recalibration phase. When you're faced with these intense, overwhelming crises, the natural response for this pattern isn't actually to lash out, it's emotional withdrawal. Right in the middle of a super intense situation, you might find yourself completely isolating instead of, verbally expressing your emotions. You are actively choosing silence over confrontation. The noise of the external world and that terrifying loss of control just becomes way too much, so your psyche basically builds a temporary fortress of solitude just to process the sheer shock of those dismantled plans. But see, it goes so much deeper than just wanting to be alone for a few days. Emotional detachment appears suddenly, severing old dependencies, even from people or situations you once deeply valued. This can be jarring, not just for the person experiencing it, but for everyone around them too. You might literally wake up one day and realize you feel entirely disconnected from a job or a relationship you cared intensely about just a week prior. And it's absolutely crucial to understand that this isn't just a random mood swing or a sign that you're somehow uncaring. This sudden inner detachment is a necessary built-in phase. It's designed specifically to sever old dependencies so you can finally move forward. Let's transition into Section 4, Finding intuition in chaos. This is where the discovery happens. So, when the visible, tangible world proves to be completely unstable, the mind naturally seeks answers elsewhere. You become powerfully drawn to the unseen. It sparks this deep, intense interest in subjects like astrology, depth psychology, mysticism, or honestly just immersive, deep dive research. Because the surface level of life has been so thoroughly disrupted, you're driven to understand the hidden, unseen layers of existence. You essentially start looking for the real rules of the game. And this brilliantly illustrates a profound internal shift. Logic, which, let's face it, is usually our primary tool for navigating the world, completely struggles to make sense of this instability. Logic wants A to lead to B, but in this phase, A leads to, Z. On the flip side, though, your intuition actually becomes sharper. When life feels totally chaotic and unstable, leaning into that sharpened intuition isn't just a nice little alternative. It is vastly superior to relying on logic. It becomes your most reliable compass, guiding your decisions way better than any rational spreadsheet ever could. Finally, we arrive at Section 5, the path to surrender, resolving these intense karmic lessons. This entire architecture basically reveals itself in 3 distinct steps. It always starts at step 1, initial resistance. We fight the change. We desperately try to grab the wheel back. But then comes step 2, the push of life events. Life doesn't negotiate with you here. It simply continues to dismantle the structures that no longer serve your growth, which inevitably leads us right to step 3, forced acceptance. That realization finally hits that resistance is entirely futile, and acceptance gradually becomes the one and only viable option you have left on the table. But here's the magic in all of this. That forced acceptance isn't a defeat. It's actually a doorway. Major life transformations and profound inner growth directly follow loss, separation, or deep emotional turning points. This is the beautiful, profound outcome of this entire placement and psychological pattern. The endings and the chaos, they were never the final destination. They were merely the demolition required for a profound spiritual awakening. True inner growth only flourishes in the space left behind by the things we finally stop trying to control. The absolutely crucial realization from our source material is simply this: control cannot be sustained permanently. It is the single repeating pattern, the ultimate lesson of Ketu in the 8th house. You can build the strongest walls, you can plan for literally every single contingency, but the universe operates on a rhythm of constant, flowing change. Evolution only occurs when that tight, fearful resistance softens, and you just stop fighting the current. So, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought today. Knowing the architecture of how life breaks down our walls, the big question is, will your surrender be forced, or will it be conscious? Are you going to wait for those control points to be painfully dissolved? Or will you recognize the pattern, lean into your intuition, and willingly let go of the wheel? The choice is entirely yours. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer today. Keep exploring, keep growing, and I'll catch you in the next one.